Hi everyone, I'm Nikki.
Hi, I'm Kaitlyn.
And we're from Finding Our Power Together. Today's video, we're talking about Indigenous youth mental health, why it's important, and things we can do to support Indigenous young people in your life. For those who are new to our channel, we're Finding Our Power Together. We're an Indigenous-led nonprofit organization that supports Indigenous youth across Canada to access mental health supports and skills. We do this by integrating mainstream mental health practices such as dialectic behavior therapy with traditional healing methods and teachings. For more about us, check out our website at findingourpowertogether.com. Let's get into the video.
What is mental health and why is it important? Mental health is a vital aspect of our well-being. Specifically, when we talk about all aspects of the self, it's really important to know that we're engaging with every part of ourselves. So balancing our mind, heart, body, and spirit. Good mental health is important for several reasons. So one of the main reasons is that we're able to navigate everyday life challenges. And when we're able to do that, it helps us to be able to know our purpose and belonging in creation and to be able to walk that good path as we're doing so. Mental health is also important because it helps us to support our relationships with others. That could be relationships with land, with creation, with our family, friends, kin, everyone in all of creation. And when we're able to do that, we're able to express our emotions and empathize with others and other things that they may be going through in that same regard. It also helps us to contribute to also doing things that are in alignment with our values and our goals, working on that good decision making. When we're able to do that, we can express certain things that sometimes are a little challenging to talk about. And when we can do that, we're really practicing our effective communication skills, which is so important to all relations that we hold with all of creation and even with ourselves.
When we talk about mental health, we're not only talking about the absence of illness. Mental health and being able to live a good life is really centered on a variety of things. Mental health and mental well-being is also a way that we can honor our physical vessel, our physical bodies. When we have good mental health and we're able to prioritize our self-care, our bodies respond well. We're able to nurture ourselves, care for ourselves, and ensure that we have a healthy body, healthy mind, and a healthy spirit. When we're doing well with our mental health, our spiritual health, and our physical health, we're able to do all of the things that we want to do. We're able to reach our highest potential. Oftentimes when we're struggling, it's really difficult to be able to do the things that we enjoy or pursue our goals and to move forward in a good way. This is why mental health is so important, because when we prioritize our mental health, everything else in our life can get better as well.
When we're thinking about the ways in which we can promote mental health, it's important to know that it's a lifelong journey. It's not necessarily something that is linear as well. It's always going to be something that's a challenge. We're going to navigate those obstacles and those paths and walk that mountain that kind of goes up and down as we go. So being able to do that in a good way that aligns with what we feel and what is actually happening around us can help us to challenge certain things and certain conceptions that may come up on our journeys, and to know that we're walking that good path as we move forward.
So at Finding Our Power Together, our priority is to support Indigenous young people across Canada. We know our young people are facing intense scrutiny and have a difficulty managing their mental health concerns, largely due to the impacts of colonization that continue to impact us. We have disproportionate rates of suicide, mental health concerns, and mental illness, and we know this has nothing to do with who we are as people, but is more a result of the environments that we've been forced to live in for such a long time. One of the biggest challenges that we've seen in talking to Indigenous young people is the lack of mental health services across Canada. Particularly in remote and far northern communities, there is a significant lack of mental health systems to be able to support Indigenous young people. We know our young people would benefit from having mental health support, and yet in many of our communities there is significant lack of mental health workers. Geographic isolation, chronic underfunding, and the lack of culturally appropriate mental health systems really creates a disparity in mental health systems for Indigenous young people, contributing to a lack of access, but also a lack of willingness to even seek help when they need it. Indigenous youth in Canada also face high rates of mental health concerns. The suicide rate in Indigenous communities is 5 to 7 times the national average, and in Inuit communities is sometimes up to 11 times the average, making us one of the most high-risk populations in the world. And this is not due to, again, our inherent lack, but is a result of the ongoing and systemic trauma that we've experienced as Indigenous people. Additionally, Indigenous young people have a myriad of other mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions that require specialized treatment and care. While there is a lack of mental health systems in many Indigenous communities, those that do exist often are modeled under a traditional Western framework. This means that Indigenous young people are being forced to be cared for by the very systems that harmed them in the first place. There is a lack of culturally competent or culturally congruent care in the mental health system in Canada, which means that many Indigenous young people do not succeed in these systems and don't even want to go through them anyway.
Indigenous communities and Indigenous kin possess a lot of amazing protective factors that can support us in navigating mental health. Some of the most important things that we talk about in navigating or combating colonialism is being able to connect with traditional ways of knowing, being, and doing. By being able to go into communities and support our kin and being able to connect with our traditional teachings, our traditional life paths, it can really help us to foster that sense of belonging and foster that sense of connection to all aspects of the self, but also with everything in creation in that same breath.
In our work with young people, we've heard so many young people sharing their journey with us, sharing their stories, and something that they have said time and time again that has been helpful for them to heal, to seek out help, and to even learn skills to put into their bundle is to have a safe space to have open conversations. We know there continues to be stigma in talking about mental health in our communities, and the stigma can sometimes make it an invisible thing that we can't talk about, that we can't open up about, that we can't express ourselves or seek help. And we have found that working with Indigenous young people, just creating that open dialogue, being able to have them share their story, their perspective, and their experiences can really be a healing process even in itself. In general, these open conversations are part of a therapeutic process. They allow us to do many things that can actually help us process our emotions and improve our mental health and well-being. In particular, having open conversations can help us understand our emotions and express them in a good way so that we understand our experiences better. Having these conversations can foster a sense of belonging and community. These conversations also help to break down stigma and share information about mental health and healing. Open dialogues can really be a jumping off point for people to seek out help and get treatment. Open conversations can even just promote resilience, allowing someone to explore their experience and how they've overcome it. Therapeutic and supportive conversations can ultimately support healing and growth. But when we're entering into these conversations, we need to ensure that we're ready, that we're ensuring that these are safe spaces, supportive spaces, and spaces that will ultimately promote mental wellness and healing. So how do we do that?
Here are some strategies that we can create those safe spaces for our Indigenous community members to have those conversations about mental health. One of the first things we can do is lead by example. And what might that look like? It may just look like modeling what that behavior may entail, having those conversations, modeling what that looks like for our youth and our kin. By doing that, we're able to show the next 7 generations how it's done. We're also able to use inclusive language, choose words that are respectful and kind, and are mindful of how other folks are dealing with mental health and how that may impact them. A lot of that really important work is engaging in that critical reflexivity, and when we're doing that, we're able to not only learn and grow with ourselves, but we're also able to learn and grow with others in community. One of the most important things that we have to navigate on this journey is learning to become uncomfortable with things that we're not necessarily used to, and that's how we grow together. We also want to encourage active listening, and that means being very present and mindful in the conversations and the dialogues that you're having. Make sure that you're actually being attentive and listening to the folks and what they're sharing with you. Make sure you look like you're engaged. Make sure that you're actually listening and getting every piece of the information that they want to share with you, because that's our community and that's our job to support and uplift our kin.
You don't have to be a mental health professional or have specialized training to have these kinds of supportive conversations with young people about mental health. All you need to do is be there and be available to have this open space to create that safety and ensure that you're a supportive person in their lives. We want to share some tips with you that we use in our mental health program called Mentorship that you might be able to use in your work with young people. Really, this is just a helpful acronym to help you stay grounded in your conversation and ensure that it is keeping a therapeutic lens. This means that this is not the kind of conversation that you have with a friend. This is a conversation in which you are entering into the position of an ashkabewis or a helper. And how you do this is really critical because it is a way of shifting your dynamic with a young person into a supportive role versus a reciprocal kind of role. In our work, we use a handy acronym called LAND, and this helps us to stay grounded in the therapeutic work we're doing with young people. LAND stands for listening mindfully, acknowledging and validating, non-judgmental curiosity, and decide together. Let's take a look at that right now. Listening mindfully is a process through which we're listening to another person with all of ourselves, being present, being actively listening, and also looking for what is not being said. Listening to how it's being said, using all of our attention and all of our gifts and our intuition to listen to what a young person is sharing. We need to create that safety to allow a young person to share and express themselves and do so in a way that is not about us, but is about them. It's really acknowledging their experience and allowing them to share what they want to share. This means that we might be just listening, not asking too many questions, not providing too much advice just yet, just having that space of silence if needed, of supportive nudging, of validation, and allowing that young person to share what they are experiencing. Next, we want to acknowledge and validate. Oftentimes when a young person reaches out for help or says that they're experiencing challenges, they're invalidated by their environment or by people around them. This means that they're told that this isn't a big deal, or this isn't something you should worry about, or there's nothing wrong with you. And when a young person is feeling that there is something wrong, that they do want help, and they're continuously told that their feelings don't matter or that they're invalid, it can actually cause more harm than good. When we're working with a young person, when we're trying to support someone in their mental health journey, all we really need to do is just acknowledge how they feel and validate that their emotions are their own. There is no judgment being placed on them, and of course they're going to have those feelings. What this can look like in practice is just to say, I can understand how you would feel that way, or of course you would feel that way given the circumstance, or I hear you. These simple statements can really make an impact in terms of allowing a young person to just feel seen and heard. And that's one of the most crucial steps in allowing someone to explore their mental health and well-being. Next, we can move into non-judgmental curiosity. What does this mean? This is just about asking curious questions, being curious about young people, allowing them to express themselves and explore deeper. Maybe you're not going to get to this point if you're not someone who works in the mental health field. That's okay, but you might just practice being non-judgmental. What this means is that you don't have to assess a situation as good or bad just yet. You don't need to agree or disagree with the young person. You simply can just validate. You simply can just take their side. You simply can just ask another question that allows them to explore things deeper. Non-judgmental curiosity is a critical therapeutic tool that allows for clinicians, but also people who are in support roles, to explore a young person's perspective more deeply without getting into the nitty-gritty of judging the situation or providing advice. And D is for decide together. This is a place where we actually put it on the person. What do they want to do now? What is their next step? Do they want to seek treatment? Do they want to make changes to their lives? And if so, how can we be a supportive person in that process? Sometimes people don't need to make decisions. Sometimes they don't need to spring into action. And maybe all that they want to decide is that they're just going to express this to you in the future. And that's okay. We don't need to always rush to give advice. We don't always need to rush to a diagnosis or an assessment or any kind of mental health system. Sometimes we just need to listen and create that safety so the young person will come to you again and again. If at any point you feel like you are not supposed to be in this role, then maybe this video wasn't for you, but that's okay. Knowing about the system, being able to make referrals, or be able to at least tell them some advice on where they can go for that support is also part of the process. In general, we should not be making decisions about a young person's mental health without them, without their consent, and without their participation in that choice. So deciding together is really a place for us to partner with young people and make good choices with them.
So a really important factor that we have to think about is the ways in which we can support mental health in the long run. Our mental health journeys aren't necessarily something that are just going to last 1 second or a certain amount of time. It's something that we're going to carry in our journey and with our bundles for as long as we live on Mother Earth. So one of the first things we can do is encourage that ongoing conversation. We talked about how opening the conversation, those dialogues are very important, but also knowing that we have to reiterate that these conversations are ever going to flow, they're ever going to ebb. So knowing that it's our responsibility to continue these conversations, not just limit or minimize what this conversation can be, but allowing it to come to its full fruition. We also want to be able to foster resilience. Our Indigenous community members are always so resilient in their being and every presence that they bring to the table. But it's also important to honor their gifts and honor what they go through, because that's something that's really important when we talk about our community. We know that we are inherently resilient, but being able to really acknowledge and see the gifts as they are and letting our community members know that we're proud of them and we're really happy for what they've come through in their journeys and their paths is really important to feeling that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose in creation. Another very important part is to advocate for change. So that can look like a plethora of things, but one of the first things is to maybe take the space and hear from your community members. What are some things that maybe they're navigating in their mental health journeys that isn't sitting necessarily well with them or that they need support with? Maybe there's something specifically in your community that isn't really resonating or jiving well. What that could mean is that you can take that step forward and try to advocate for that change. Maybe there's a certain policy that needs to be put in place. Maybe there's community gaps that need to be looked into. Maybe you can be that stepping stone to help bring those things into community and support community the best way that you can and show up not only for yourself but for everyone else as well.
There are a few things to mention when we're having these conversations with young people, or anyone for that matter, about mental health. We need to ensure that we're protecting ourselves, our spirits, and allowing ourselves to be in that helper role without taking on other people's trauma, other people's mental health, other people's burdens. We need to do this in a few ways. First, it's really important when you're having a safe space for a young person to set the parameters of that relationship. And that is really a personal thing to you and what you are putting out there in the world. For instance, for me, I might at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. turn off my phone so I can spend time with my family. And those are the ground rules that I set in my own practice. Yours might look different, but setting up some ground rules with a young person that you're supporting is really important, because not only are you protecting yourself, but you're also teaching the young person how they might need to manage their own emotions and behaviors in times of stress. They can't always have 24-hour access to you, and that's okay. Setting those ground rules up, and also to let them know the limit of your capability. If you're a mental health professional, of course, you might be able to do more intensive therapies or interventions with them, as opposed to, hey, I'm your older cousin or I'm your friend, and our relationship is going to look a lot different. Being upfront and transparent about that is really critical to having these conversations. Similar to this is having your own boundaries, knowing where your role with a young person starts and stops, knowing how much of yourself you're going to bring to the conversation and how much you're going to reserve for yourself. Setting up these boundaries and demonstrating what you are going to do in the case that someone breaks your boundaries is really critical to any support work you might do with a young person. Ensuring that you know what the boundaries are, where you want to start and stop your relationship, is not a mean thing to do. It's actually a way to enhance safety in your relationship. We've created this video because we think that these conversations can happen anywhere with anyone. If you're someone who doesn't have mental health training or not working in that kind of role, there is a limit to what you would be professionally able to do. It's one thing to have a supportive person in your life that can be someone who is a sounding board. It's another thing to be doing intensive therapy with a person. When creating these safe spaces, when being in a helper role, we also need to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves. This means that as a supportive person, you also need a support network yourself. We all need somewhere to go, to lean on, to get support when we need it. And if you're interested in supporting someone with their mental health, you should be doing the work too. Lead by example. So ensure that you have your own mental health system, whether that be a therapist, an elder, someone that you can go to, a friend who you can go to talk to. Ensure that you have your own support network established, so when things come up for you, which they likely will, you have people to go to who can help get you back to baseline. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about Indigenous youth mental health and ways to create safe conversations about mental illness and well-being. We hope you'd enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe, follow us on social media. We post mental health content from an Indigenous lens so that we can support Indigenous youth across Canada to build their bundle. Famapi!
Famapi!